I'll never forget the weight of silence that first evening, how it pressed against my ears until I could almost hear my own pulse. I'd left my phone, watch, and GPS locked in the glove compartment of my truck at the trailhead, turned the key, and told myself I didn't need them. Just 2 days, I thought. 2 days without screens, messages, or headlines. The forest beyond the gravel lot was deep green and cool, shadows stretching long across the moss. I should have felt free, but instead there was that twitchy restlessness, like my hand kept reaching for something that wasn't there. I didn't realize how often I checked the time until I couldn't anymore. I hiked for hours, letting the rhythm of my boots and breath replace the hum of alerts and background noise. A creek ran beside the trail, tumbling over smooth stones, and the air smelled of wet pine and decaying leaves. When I made camp near a bend in the water, I fumbled with my gear like a beginner, forgot where I'd packed the matches, dropped my tarp twice, and cursed softly at my own impatience. The stillness unsettled me. No music, no chatter, no constant scrolling thumb to fill the space. Just the rustle of wind through spruce boughs and the occasional crack of a branch somewhere in the dark. That night, the forest was alive with tiny sounds, the creak of trees, the whisper of something small moving through the underbrush. I stared into the campfire, its flames bending and snapping in the draft, and felt that uneasy itch of withdrawal from the world I'd left behind. It was strange to think that only a few miles away, people were driving home from work, checking messages, making dinner with the TV murmuring in the background. Here, there was nothing to check, nothing to know. The fire faded to embers, and I lay in my sleeping bag, staring at the fabric ceiling of my tent, listening to my breath until I finally drifted off. By morning, though, something had shifted. The frustration was gone, replaced by a quiet sort of clarity. I made coffee over the little stove, the smell rich and earthy in the damp morning air, and felt present, in a way I hadn't for years. I could hear everything: the gentle current of the creek, a woodpecker tapping high above, the faint rustle of squirrels leaping between branches. My thoughts had slowed, softened, like silt settling to the bottom of clear water. I'd come out here to escape noise, but what I found was something else entirely. A reminder that the world doesn't need me to keep spinning. It just keeps going. By the second day, I'd stopped counting hours altogether. The sun told me what I needed to know: when to wake, when to eat, when to rest. I followed the ridge trail until it opened to a clearing of tall grass, golden and waving, the kind that catches the wind and bends like ocean waves. I dropped my pack there, spread out my sleeping pad, and lay flat on my back staring up at a sky so impossibly blue it almost hurt to look at. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt no impulse to check anything, no phantom vibration in my pocket, no urge to measure the moment by the number of photos I could take. The day passed in slow layers. Sunlight warming the earth, the rhythm of my breath syncing with the hum of insects, and the lazy drift of clouds that seemed to take on shapes just for me. I wandered through the afternoon with no plan, collected firewood, rinsed my shirt in the creek, and even sat still long enough for a chickadee to land a few feet away on a branch, head cocked, curious. The forest had accepted me as part of its quiet routine. That evening, I made a small fire again, though I barely needed it for warmth. It was for companionship, really. The flicker and pop of burning cedar, filling the space where conversation might have been. I thought about how much time I'd wasted worrying about things that seemed so heavy back home. Deadlines, emails, all that static that fills the day until you can't hear your own thoughts anymore. Out here, none of it mattered. The firelight danced over my hands. The stars came out one by one, and I realised I hadn't felt lonely once all day. Sleep came easily that night. I dreamed of rivers and wind and long stretches of road without signs. When dawn arrived, it came gently. Pale pink light touching the tops of the trees, birds waking one by one. I brewed the last of my coffee, packed up camp, and shouldered my gear with a feeling that was almost reluctance. Civilization was only a few miles down the trail, but it felt like another world entirely. As I hiked back, I tried to imprint every detail on my memory. The smell of damp pine needles, the crunch of gravel underfoot, the steady rhythm of my heart. I'd come seeking silence, and I'd found it. I'd come to disconnect, and somehow I'd reconnected instead. With the earth, with myself, with the simple truth that peace doesn't live behind a screen or a signal. At the trailhead, I stopped by my truck, hand resting on the door handle, and hesitated. For a long moment, I just stood there, reluctant to open that door and step back into the noise. I didn't know yet that the world waiting beyond that forest had changed while I'd been gone. The first thing that struck me when I turned the ignition key wasn't the hum of the engine. It was the silence of my phone. I'd expected a flood of vibrations the moment it powered back on, but instead, the screen flickered to life and froze. No signal. I started the drive down the forest road, the narrow dirt lane twisting between tall pines, until the first bars finally appeared. Then it began. The sharp buzz of messages, the endless chime of missed calls, the strange, almost desperate flood of digital noise that shattered the calm I'd been living in. For a while, I ignored it. I just drove, window down, the smell of dust and pine sap rushing in. But curiosity, it's a stubborn thing. At the first turnout, I stopped, grabbed the phone and glanced at the screen. Dozens of notifications scrolled by. News alerts, texts from friends, even a few from my mother marked urgent. I opened one of the headlines and my heart sank. An earthquake, a massive one. It had struck along the west coast late the night before. The words blurred for a moment as I tried to understand. Collapsed bridges, fires, cities without power, tens of thousands displaced. I scrolled further and saw the date, barely 36 hours ago. Just after I'd fallen asleep beside my fire, the ground hundreds of miles away had been tearing itself apart. I sat there in the cab for a long time, the sound of the forest still whispering around me, the screen glowing faintly in my palm. The contrast was almost surreal. Out here, nothing had changed. The creek still flowed, the sun still rose, and the pines still swayed in the wind. But the world beyond the tree line had shifted, cracked open in ways I couldn't yet imagine. I started driving again, slower this time, eyes flicking between the road and the scattered headlines that read like dispatches from another reality. Power outages across multiple states, airports closed, emergency declarations, friends asking if I was safe. A cousin who lived in Portland sent a single message. "We're okay. It's chaos here. Where are you?" Where was I? Somewhere between two worlds, I guess. halfway between the peace I'd found and the chaos waiting on the other side. The forest felt like a dream now, something too pure to belong to the same reality as toppled buildings and sirens. I realized then that while I'd been searching for quiet, the world had found its own way to scream. By the time I reached the main highway, I'd turned the radio on. The voice of the announcer trembled as he read updates, his words cutting through the static like shards of glass. And just like that, the bubble burst. My weekend of silence ended not with a soft return to routine, but with the hard, cold reminder that peace is fragile, and the world never pauses, even when you do. When I finally reached the small town near the trailhead, it looked almost normal at first. Cars at the gas station, a few folks walking dogs, the grocery store sign blinking lazily in the afternoon sun. But there was an edge to it all, a current of unease beneath the surface. People stood in little knots near the pumps and outside the diner, talking in low, hurried voices. Every radio I heard through open doors carried the same tone, disbelief mixed with fear. I filled up my tank and went inside to pay. The clerk looked exhausted, eyes rimmed red. "You just get back from somewhere?" he asked, handing me my receipt. When I told him I'd been camping without a phone for a couple of days, he gave a low whistle. "You missed it, man. Whole coast's torn up. They're saying it's one of the biggest quakes in history. Roads gone, lines down, folks can't reach. Family, it's bad." The words hit me like a wave. Just 48 hours earlier, I'd been sitting by a fire, watching sparks drift into the sky, thinking the world was at peace. Now, that same sky hung over broken cities and darkened streets hundreds of miles away. I bought a cup of coffee, sat on the hood of my truck, and watched people moving through the parking lot with that strange, distracted purpose of those who don't yet know what to do. The caffeine did nothing to shake the heaviness settling in my chest. I tried calling my parents, my sister, a few friends. Calls failed, signals dropped, voicemail boxes full. My mind raced through every face, every conversation I'd taken for granted before my little digital detox. I had wanted to escape the noise of the world, but now that I'd found silence, I realized how quickly it could turn from peaceful to isolating. Driving home took twice as long as usual. Emergency vehicles screamed down the opposite lanes, and the radio kept looping updates. Coastal evacuations, rescue operations, fires spreading near the bay. Somewhere along the highway, I pulled over at a scenic overlook, a place I'd stopped once before on another trip, and stepped out into the wind. Below me, the valley rolled out in quiet folds of farmland, utterly untouched. Cows grazed. Birds wheeled over the treetops. The contrast was unbearable. Standing there, I thought about the smallness of our routines, the fragile little systems we build and call normal. In the woods, stripped of all of it, I'd felt connected to something timeless. But back in the modern world, it all seemed so delicate, so breakable. The earth had shifted, and suddenly everything that mattered felt different. I climbed back into the truck, heart heavy, carrying both worlds inside me. The stillness of the forest and the trembling of everything beyond it. When I reached home, the sun was setting in streaks of red and grey, a colour that somehow fit the mood of everything. The power was still on in my neighbourhood, though the street was quieter than usual. No kids on bikes, no dogs barking. Just the uneasy stillness of people inside, glued to their screens, trying to make sense of what had happened. I parked, stepped out, and stood for a long time in my driveway before going in. Inside, the house felt foreign. My phone buzzed endlessly on the counter, notifications stacking faster than I could read them. friends checking in, work emails about closures. A message from my sister saying she was fine but couldn't reach our aunt out west. I skimmed headlines, images of collapsed freeways, darkened skylines, rescue crews wading through broken streets. Each photo felt like a punch. That serene world I'd just left behind, the quiet creek and the birdsong, seemed impossibly distant now. I went out back and sat on the porch steps, the evening cool and damp. My clothes still smelled faintly of smoke and pine, that forest scent clinging
Stubbornly to me, a ghost of peace in the middle of all the noise. I could hear neighbours talking across their fences, worried voices blending with the hum of a radio someone had turned up too loud. For the first time, I didn't reach for my phone. I just listened. It struck me how absurdly fragile our sense of control is. How one moment we're worrying about schedules and unread messages, and the next, the world is shaking itself apart. Out there in the woods, the earth had been steady beneath my boots. Here, it felt as if everything underfoot had shifted, even if the ground was still. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying the sound of the creek in my mind, the steady whisper of water moving over stone. It reminded me that no matter what happened, nature would keep going. The forest I'd camped in would wake to another sunrise the same way it had for centuries, untouched by the panic of the news cycle. By morning, I made a quiet decision. I'd still read the headlines, still help where I could, but I wouldn't drown in the noise again. That weekend had taught me something I didn't want to forget. Peace isn't found in the absence of disaster. It's found in the moments when you choose stillness despite it. Sometimes, I think back to that last night in the woods, the crackle of the fire, the stars unblinking above the trees, and realise I wasn't escaping the world at all. I was learning how to face it. And maybe that's what we all need now and then. To step away long enough to remember how to return.